And welcome back to the Hot Lap. Welcome to our 2024 F1 prediction show, where we are going to go down pretty much the list of drivers and try and, guesstimate, let's say, at best, how they're going to do in 2024. But I love to ramble. So to help me not ramble so much, apologies in advance, we're going to be talking about, are they going to win a race? What will be their best place? Will they get pole? Best quali though? Will they beat their teammate? And sometimes, I imagine, we're even going to ask whether they can win the World Championship. However, someone like, no offence, Logan Sargent, Zhao Guanyu, for example, they are probably not going to be F1 title contenders. If they are, I would love my predictions to be wrong. That would be absolutely amazing. So, let's get into our very first person. Oh, funny that. It's Zhao Guanyu. So, as we know, these are the stats from last year. And I think Zhao in the Alfa Romeo, he didn't really do as well as Bottas, did he? He did okay. I predict next year he's not going to win a race. I do not think he's going to beat his teammate Bottas. I think Valtteri will still beat Zhao Guanyu. I think Valtteri will still finish ahead of him. However, I do think he's going to get points. I do think he'll be in the top 10. I do think on at least one occasion he's going to qualify in that top 10. But I don't think he's going to set the world alight. And unless there are specific Chinese investors, because remember, this is the first year for a while we're going to have the Chinese Grand Prix. And unless that happens, I don't think that Zhao will be here for 2025, which I think is sad in a way, but he needs a really, really big 2024 to save his 2025. But that's Zhao Guanyu. Not going to set the world alight. He's been solid, but I don't think he's going to be solid enough. Who is next? Well, it's going to be Yuki Tsunoda. This is interesting because this is going to be the fight of 2024. It's Rocky-esque, I think. It's going to be Tsunoda in one corner, Daniel Ricciardo in the other. Only one will survive. If any of you watched Highlander, there can only be one. I think only one of these two will be going into 2025, unless I think the only thing that may well save Tsunoda is Honda or Honda going to Aston Martin eventually with these new rules. That could save Tsunoda. I think though Tsunoda was one of the standout drivers, in terms of how well he did. Excuse me, the phone. How well he did year on year. And is it going to be enough? Because we know how harsh the Red Bull Juniors are. I know they want to get away from that almost stigma, but we know how harsh the Red Bull team can be. He is under the Red Bull team. I think, and we'll get into it in a bit, but I think Daniel Ricciardo is going to beat him. I think we will see Tsunoda in the top 10. We will see Tsunoda in the top 10 for both quali and the race. Definitely, I think he's going to be scoring points, because let's not forget that the AlphaTauri, or whatever it's going to be called for 2024, could be a rocket ship like the Red Bull. They're taking as much from the Red Bull team as possible in order to make their car as good as they can. And you may well have potentially a top 5 car, if not faster. I still think he's going to lose eventually to Daniel Ricciardo. Ricciardo's going to have his wrist absolutely 110% now, isn't he? His wrist is going to be better. But Tsunoda needs a really, really solid year. I struggle to see him in that seat going into 2025, unless obviously, for example, Honda are going to come. So yes, he's going to lose to his teammate, but top 10 quality, top 10. Part of me wants to be wrong, because I think he's one of the more exciting Japanese drivers. Well, all Japanese drivers I think are quite exciting, but he's one of the more exciting prospects going into this year because of the question marks and the fact he did improve from 22 to 23. But that's just my opinion on Mr. Yuki Tsunoda. He had a solid, though, 2023. Do not let me take that away from you, Tsunoda. Please don't. So, next up, Valtteri Bottas. Yes, Valtteri Bottas. He's obviously got a contract for 2024. How good is Bottas going to do? I think he's going to beat his teammate, albeit, Zhao Guanyu. His teammate, though, it's not He's better than Logan Sargent, for example, that people are going to compare Alex Albon to. However, he's not exactly setting the world alight. Remember, Bottas, this is the man that has outqualified and outraced at times, not often, but he has, Lewis Hamilton. I think he will beat his teammate by he'll be solid, but the issue is he going to be solid enough? Yes, I think top tens in qualifying and obviously the grid, on the grid as well, in the top 10 and top 10 in the races. Absolutely, he will beat his teammate. In terms of overall position, he's definitely going to be in the bottom third, I think, in the championship. And for that, I kind of question that whether the Alfa Romeo team, or whatever they're going to be called, going into 2024, after 2025, going into 2026, I don't think he's solid enough to keep. I think he's potentially in the twilight of his Formula One career, unless, obviously, he proves us wrong, which I do want him to do. I like Bottas. I think he's a Mercedes in 2021. He was solid, but I feel there's far too many times he wasn't tough enough in the races. So the Alfa Romeo, or the 2024 version of Alfa Romeo, have got a kind of like a meh driver lineup, really. So, yeah, I mean, they could both be gone as we go into the Audi era. Nico Hülkenberg, for example, potentially could have a contract to take Bottas's or Zhao's place. But I digress. Here's an interesting one. Sergio Perez. Yes, Sergio. So, I don't think he's going to make the end of 2024. I think he may have a solid 2024 start like he had in 22 and 23, but very quickly it's gonna taper off unless he unlocks something with this with Red Bull. But as we know, that Red Bull, quite often when it's developed, it's suited to Max Verstappen. Why? Because Max is the faster of the two drivers. He can get the most out of that Red Bull. And let's not forget, I know I'm like beating a dead horse now, but Sergio Perez finished second to Max Verstappen. Yes, he got the job done, but when you look at the gap, when you look at how difficult it was for him to get the job done, it was like he was ice skating uphill. It was absolutely horrendous the way he did it. He was out of Q1 at times. He didn't make Q3 in the fastest car. He struggled. He made mistakes. I mean, for him, it was almost like a rookie year. You could make an argument that despite those 2 wins, it was his worst year compared to his teammate at Red Bull since he joined in 2021. I think out of the 2 AlphaTauri teams, I think one of them, either Tsunoda or Ricciardo, could replace him. I'm basically going with Daniel Ricciardo. I think Ricciardo, we saw what he can do in Mexico. I think Tsunoda still potentially makes too many mistakes, and I think Ricciardo could take his place before by the summer break. Is what I think Sergio Perez will last, even if he does win a race. This championship, if it is closer than last year, if we have Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren being closer to Red Bull, then potentially, unless Sergio Perez sorts himself out, there's going to be a much bigger gap between him and Verstappen. And also, there won't just be 1 or 2 cars. There could be half the grid, so at times, between Verstappen, who may well get pole, and Sergio Perez. And there's going to become the difficulty, if it is close, because Verstappen then has no rear gunner. They have less strategy options because of Perez's pace. And I think it'll be see you later, Perez, in the summer break. I wish I was wrong. I would love Sergio Perez to mount a challenge from day one, win the first 3 races, put Verstappen under pressure. Then we're really going to see how good Mr. Verstappen really, really is. But I'm not predicting too much for Sergio Perez, sadly. Oh, Perez. Oh, Perez. So next up, we've got Pierre of the Gasly. Yes, Pierre Gasly. So, Mr. Gasly. That's the 3rd time. I think he's a fairly solid driver. I think he showed Ocon at Alpine and a real wake up. He showed us all how good he was in the tour in the AlphaTauri. He won a race, for example. Yes, there's an eye he lucked into it a tiny bit, but the pressure was there. Sainz was right behind him in what was it? I think the 2020 or whatever year it was at Monza, and he did it. I mean, this guy is a solid driver. It's just a shame at the moment that Alpine are crumbling. So I think Gasly will outqualify Ocon. He will beat Ocon, beat his teammate. I think he will be getting a podium at some point. We will have one of those races where the top 3 or 4 teams, something will go wrong. I do think he has a potential, the team will have the potential to get a podium. Not many. I think he will potentially start in the top 3 at a race, probably have a weird qualifying session. He's got the potential there. On sheer pace, I don't think the Alpine is fast enough. But on the day when things aren't going well for the other teams, I think Gasly could be your man in that Alpine, and I think he will beat Ocon. Next up, we have Oscar Piastri. Yes, people are saying one of the rookies of the year. The rookie of the year last year. One of the best rookies since Lewis Hamilton. It's a bit hard to disagree with that point. So, he won a sprint race. He had a sprint pole, which is immediately better than anything Lando Norris did, where in terms of poles and wins, because Norris didn't get a pole. He could have got a pole. He binned it, essentially, not in the wall or anything, but he blew it, his pole, and therefore I think he also blew any chances of winning. Now, between the two, I think Oscar Piastri is potentially going to give Lando Norris a bit of difficulty next year. His big issue with Oscar, the big difference between Oscar and Lando Norris are dealing with the tyres. And I think, on that note, Mr. Piastri has got a year under the belt. He's going to be learning. He's going to be closer to Norris. I don't think he's yet the more complete package that Norris is. I know there's a few question marks with Lando, which we'll get into, but I think he'll give Lando a much harder time. He won't beat Lando this year. However, I think if that McLaren's good enough, both him and Lando are going to win races, and I don't be surprised if Oscar gets a pole or a win before Lando. I really think it's toss a coin between the two, but I do think he's capable of winning a race if McLaren follow that path, and if that Red Bull is not too dominant. But we're talking definite podiums for this guy. And I think he'll finish a lot closer to Lando, but just slightly behind for Lando Norris. Well done, Oscar. I predict good things for you in 2024. So, next up, we have Nico Hülkenberg. Yes, the MVP for Haas last year, as Magnussen was the most loved driver when it was him and Mick Schumacher. And he, as we said, he's pretty much done to... Kevin Magnussen. That Kevin Magnussen did to Mick Schumacher. He has been, despite his career being saved, I think, by that Haas signing, he's been quite forward about not being a massive fan of the Haas team. Haas went on his contract. Yeah, they wanted to continue with him. He had that option. I don't see Nico Hülkenberg being at Haas for 2025. I think he'll move on, maybe go to the Audi project. He could replace Bottas or Zhou. I do think he'll get a top 10 finish. He will get in that top 10 on the grid. I don't think he'll quite get a podium. Maybe like 6th or 7th, both in qualifying and the race. Could be his best place. Could be his best place finish. I do think he'll beat Kevin Magnussen. Kevin Magnussen needs a really, really big year, I feel. But Nico Hülkenberg, he's the favourite amongst the Haas team after what he did to Kevin Magnussen. He kind of destroyed him, really, didn't he, throughout the year? And awesome qualifying performances. They both had, but awesome for Nico Hülkenberg. So, next up, this is pretty much completely run. Oh, who is this? Yes, it's our 3-time champion, potentially 4-time champion. You would be a very silly man if going into 2024, Max Verstappen was not your favourite. I think the Red Bull will start as one of the fastest car. I do think it will be a lot closer between Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren. Not quite sure what Alpine will be doing. But I think Max in that Red Bull, he knows the team really, really well. He knows he's got Perez under his control. It's going to be, I think, Max all the way for at least the first quarter to a third of the season. And he's going to be a really, really hard man to beat. It's something what I thought was... pole, he's going to get wins. He's going to beat his teammate. Something what I thought was quite interesting, though, that Fred Vassar said about Max is that it's going to be interesting to see how he handles pressure. We've seen with Lewis Hamilton that both Hamilton and Max do make mistakes. He does make mistakes. I remember Vettel going through his dominant run in the Red Bull when he was under pressure and things weren't going 100%, well, not 100%, things weren't going well. It started to all fall apart. And I think this is the big test now after 2021 that Max needs to have to solidify going from a great driver, let's say, to a legend status, he needs a really, really tough championship fight without any controversy, without any controversial ending, to absolutely stamp his authority on, I am one of the legends of the sport. He hasn't had that yet, I think. As great as he is, that's why I really want a really strong championship fight with Max, with either Ferrari drivers, probably really with both the Mercedes drivers. And I'll give my reasons for that in a bit when we get onto them. But yeah, you're not going to go wrong at all by not saying that Max Verstappen isn't the favourite going into the 2024 season. He's favourite for champion at the moment. Absolutely. So we've gone. I've just seen who's next. So we've gone from the championship favourite to the man that I think pretty much finished bottom of our list, Logan Sargent, one of the luckiest men in my opinion in Formula One to be re-signed by James Vowles. Obviously, James Vowles has a lot more information than we have as fans, just looking, for example, at the stats, etc. But I mean, he finished 21st in the standings, which wasn't great, as we know. And Logan completely outshone by Alex Albon. He was close at times. He made loads of mistakes, the most mistakes, I think. He was by far is one of the weakest rookies we've had in Formula One. It's almost like pay driver level-esque levels, I think. But he has shown he had talent. He was. I mean, there was that moment in Abu Dhabi where he was like, yes, I can do it. I can get out, I can out-qualify maybe Albon or get up there. And on his both laps, they got deleted because he went off the track. Yes, it has happened to better drivers. But other than that, lucky disqualification in America, it was a very average year. So for Logan Sargent, no, he's not going to beat his teammate. No, he is not going to. I think he may qualify in the top 10. I think he could, but we're talking 10th. He's not going to win a race. He's probably going to finish about 10th at most. And I think that's going to be it for Logan Sargent. I don't think he will be here, though, for 2025. I think Williams will drop him for what is potentially a more exciting prospect. So, I mean, there's Logan. I'm so sorry to any Logan fans. I would love him to do better. I really, really would. But I don't think he will. So, next up, Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, it is an interesting one here. I think he may well be Max Verstappen. If they can get that Mercedes right, I think he's the best driver to take it to Max Verstappen. He's more complete than both the Ferrari drivers and both the McLaren drivers. And given the right car, if Mercedes can get that car right, even if they can get within a couple of tenths of that Red Bull at the beginning of the season, I feel Hamilton will be right there. That a lot of it would rest on Mercedes. We know Hamilton can beat Verstappen just as much as Verstappen can beat Hamilton. They're both each other's nemesises or nemesi, but Hamilton is. I think he will beat George Russell. It will be closer than it was last year. I think he will beat George Russell. Yes, I do think that Mercedes will get a win next year because I think they're focusing so much on 2024. They understand what's gone wrong. It's going to be a case of how many wins they can get this year and how close to Red Bull they can get, because I feel the teams will be closer. Teams like Mercedes will be putting more pressure on Red Bull. I think Red Bull, when you put more pressure on people, they had it all their own way. Verstappen was cruising last year, and so much of these predictions, I think, depend on how good that Red Bull car is. I do think Hamilton will win. I do think he'll get a pole, and I do think he'll beat George Russell. That's not to say that George Russell isn't going to get a win or pole, and I do think, given a half decent car, he can put up some kind of title challenge to Max Verstappen. Put the pressure on Max. I think Max, he's only human after all, and I think Max will make mistakes, but how many is going to depend on who's going to win the title. Max is still the favourite, no doubt, but I think we all want somebody to put that fight to the title, and I feel that Hamilton is the man, and I'll explain why when I get to the other drivers. But there we go. Lewis Hamilton, one of the championship contenders for 2024, assuming that they build a decent Mercedes car. I think a lot rides on how good that car is. So next up, and this guy, didn't he have a decent car in the second half of the year? And what a driver he was. He's really shown us his talent. He had a really, really solid 2023 2023, sorry, and and he said 2022 or 2024, and he showed us how good he can be. However, the big issue with Lando Norris is I think he's going to be his teammate. I think he will, if McLaren go on this trajectory, he will get his first win, he will get his first pole, and I think he will be his teammate. But the big if is he seems to almost, like, I don't want to say bottle it, but he has these moments where he can get that pole position and he doesn't because he makes a mistake and he's really, really hard on himself. I felt there were times last year where he could have been a bit closer to the fight, to fighting or to going for a win. I mean, Singapore was close. But when he fights Verstappen and some other people, I can't ever feel he makes it a bit too easy to drivers to pass, or he's not aggressive enough. There's something that I feel that the problem that Leclerc has as well, and it's both him and Leclerc, Charles. I feel are missing just that, like, one, I don't know, like that 5% of that bit more aggression that, like, Max has, Hamilton has, even George Russell has sometimes to his detriment. Of that hunger, because we don't know he's hungry, but showing that hunger when you really, really want to overtake somebody. Yes, at times people have said it's completely pointless fighting Max, but you never know. You put Max under pressure, maybe he goes off. There's always that 1% chance. You know, he makes a mistake, and he has in the past, and he will do again under pressure. He's human. That's where Lando Norris is right now. I don't think he's gonna be a championship contender. Maybe he will through part of the season, but a lot of it's going to depend on how good McLaren can upgrade their car. It wouldn't surprise me though if the McLaren team come, and I really hope they do, with one of the best cars of the year. And is Norris head strong enough? I hope we find out. I don't know if he is. I think he can be though. Say for example he makes a few mistakes and that's why he's out of championship contention this year. I do feel he is a potential champion in rating, given the right car and given confidence in himself. I don't think though at the moment he's absolutely confident in himself because of those mistakes, and he's shown us. However, he does have the talent to be a world champion. So, and he's one of my favourite drivers as well. That's me being biased, I know, but yeah, I really feel he's looking good. So next up we have Lance of the Stroll. Oh, Lance Stroll. So Daddy's bought an F1 team and you are still an F1 driver. Pretty much is how I feel about Lance Stroll. No way. Will he beat his teammate Fernando Alonso? No. Will he qualify in the top 10? Yes. Will he finish in the top 10? Yes. Will he get a podium? Yes. Can he win a race? No. I think he needs to be very, very lucky. I know I mentioned Gasly needs a bit of luck too, but Gasly, Stroll, who do you pick? Let's be fair. If it wasn't for his father owning owning a big stake in the Aston Martin F1 team, Lance Stroll would not be in Formula One. It's an absolute fact. I mean, you're the Aston Martin boss. You would be hiring someone else. Maybe you would have kept Vettel. Think about it, Vettel and Alonso. What a twosome that could have been. Dragovic, I believe their test driver, a lot better than Lance Stroll, I feel. Lance Stroll's Qatar, qualifying, pushing his trainer. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't really addressed. Are the team scared? Are the team scared of Daddy Stroll? Maybe. None of them really... and I get it. You don't want to publicly humiliate or say anything bad about your driver. Completely understand that. But Lance needs a massive 2024, I think, for people to take him seriously. He has shown glimpses of talent. He has had pole position before in Turkey. He did lead that race, looking like a champion in Turkey. But these are just little flits, tiny little flames of potential that we do not see enough. He's not, given how long now he's been in Formula One, he should be a lot more consistent, and he's not, and he still makes too many mistakes. And he's there because of his dad. So, yeah, unless... I see him in 2025 in the Aston Martin. Once again, though, that's only because of Papa Stroll. So let's get into another person that's a dad and also had a famous dad as Jan Magnussen. We've got Kevin of the Magnussen in the Haas. I think this could be his last year in Formula One. He kind of came in a similar way to his teammate Hulkenberg, didn't he? When obviously the Russian driver unfortunately went for him. Not for Haas, though, because they ended up getting Kevin Magnussen, who then showed Mick Schumacher the way, and Nico Hulkenberg has shown Kevin Magnussen the way. I don't think it's going to be any different next year. I do think he can finish in the top 10. I think he'll get both a top 10 finish and a top 10 on the grid. I don't think he will beat Hulkenberg. He'll trouble him maybe at times, but throughout the season, Hulkenberg is definitely going to be number one in that team, and Kevin has not shown us anything different. However, I love to be proven wrong. I think the Haas may well be the worst race team again next year, which is going to be a big problem, and that will, I think, make people that want Andretti as the other American team smile a bit more, because the Haas is very much saying, no, we are the American team, especially for example around Kota, etc. But Magnussen, I don't predict that strong a 2024. I want to be wrong. I really do. Prove me wrong, Kevin. Make me smart. I loved you in McLaren when you were there. Next up, we have George of the Russell. Yes, George Russell. What a disappointing for him 2023. That's his own words. He had a solid 2022. I don't know, some people have said he's trying to be Lewis Hamilton and failing. I think he's trying to be George Russell. The good thing is, I don't think Lewis Hamilton, being Hamilton's teammate, unlike Bottas, who's kind of like admitted that it did phase him, in a way, I don't think it phases George. I think George, unlike Lando Norris, believes in himself, and maybe sometimes too much, because yes, he has made silly mistakes, for example, at Singapore, and I do for who's the weak link in Mercedes. And that there's an argument that I think watching even the Sky podcast the other day when they were talking about the team principles, Ted Kravitz even, or I think it was Kravitz or Crofty came out suggesting that the Mercedes car did not deserve to be second and it was down to their two drivers. More so, obviously, Lewis than George Russell. But George definitely has the talent, like Lando Norris, to be a champion. He's just, I think, missing that, not the aggression like Norris is of passing. We know he's got that in spades. He's almost missing us. Just think that tiny bit of consistency. He's that Lando Norris, funny enough, does, unless it's going for the pole position, that Lando Norris does have. I feel Norris is more consistent. If you put him and Norris together, you have a Verstappen beater, I think, if you mix their genes up. So he will win a race, I think, this year. He will get pole position, I believe, this year. I don't think he'll beat Lewis Hamilton. But I think he won't be too far from Lewis, and I think he'll give Lewis a much harder time than he gave Lewis in 2023. That's essentially what I feel about George Russell. Now, another potential go-to, yes, Fernando Alonso. A lot of it is going to depend on how good that Aston Martin is. I do think podiums are definitely a potential. I also feel that, top threes are potentially in qualifying. Definitely going to beat his teammates. Not going to be very hard. Big question mark is on the car. Now, the issue is Ferrari, McLaren and Mercedes, I think, will come into 2024 with a better car than Aston Martin. Not by much, though. I still think Aston will have a solid car, and at times it could beat them. And I think that's going to be the issue for Alonso. I still think he will have a cracking year, but I think he'll struggle to beat the McLaren drivers, the Ferrari drivers, and the Mercedes drivers. He might beat Perez if for example, that Red Bull is not as fast, and we have that big gap. And Perez, we have very much a 2023 second half of the year Perez, and I can't see that changing for Sergio. But enough about Sergio. I think Alonso, though, will have a solid year, but I don't think it will be as good as last year. I think Aston Martin stole the march, and it was as much as Aston Martin producing an amazing car as it was. McLaren definitely messed up, Mercedes definitely messed up, and Ferrari did. They really didn't start the year as they should have done. They left the gap, and Aston Martin took it. And what a year Aston Martin had, though. That's not to take away, because essentially they were for the first quarter, third of the year, the second fastest car, and the only contenders really to Verstappen. And it's such a shame about that Monaco miss. So we've got the second half of the Alpine team, Esteban Ocon, race winner in Hungary. And I think under pressure, I still think he could be there for 2025, because who else are Alpine going to keep? I think Alpine have got a lot more problems in their drivers going into 2025. So I think status quo with the drivers for the next few years is really important. And the way the current drivers on the grid are, even for 2025, I think these people should stay. It would make sense to stay another year. I don't think Ocon is going to beat Gasly though, but I do think, but like Gasly, there is a potential for the odd podium should the seas part and some of the big teams mess up. And I do think there is a chance for a top 3 in qualifying for those same reasons. But I don't think he's going to be beating his teammate anytime soon throughout the course of a year. So, deep breath. That was Esteban Ocon. A few more to go, but not many. So next up, once Ocon is... Well, there you go. Ocon's gone. See you later. We've got Daniel Ricciardo, and this man, isn't he an interesting one? So, Daniel Ricciardo, I think he will beat Tsunoda, his teammate. It will be a lot. It will be really, really close. It will be closer than I think a lot of people think. And I do think, come the summer break, my prediction is one of the two AlphaTauri drivers, and probably Ricciardo, will be getting that Red Bull seat, because Perez gave us no reason to think he's going to improve on his form come the end of the year. And I think the other teams will be closer to that Red Bull. I hope they're closer. I'm being an optimist. I hope they're closer to the Red Bull team. And if they are, I think Daniel Ricciardo will beat Tsunoda. Bearing in mind, I've spoken about how good that car could be, borrowing, taking things legally, obviously, from that Red Bull team. That may well raise a few eyebrows at the beginning of the year, but I think Ricciardo will be in a Red Bull car alongside Verstappen by the end of the year. And Sergio Perez, I'm not too sure what's going to be happening to him. Hopefully hopefully he'll get a drive somewhere, even if it is outside of Formula One. So next up, Charles Leclerc. Everyone says the best of the two Ferrari drivers, but let's be honest, their first year together, Carlos Sainz beat him. Yes, you can argue he was slightly unlucky. The only year he's looked significantly better than Sainz was 2022. This year he looked, okay. Towards the end of the year, once he got the car to his liking, he was really, really solid. Going into this year, I do think, because the team are have been quite, and you've got Fred Vassar there. They're very much Team Leclerc than they are Team Sainz. There's all these rumours still that he's yet they're going to confirm a long-term deal for Leclerc, but not so long for Carlos Sainz. I mean, there's your answer in how confident they are. Charles Leclerc has the talent to become a champion. I think he has the talent to beat Verstappen and Hamilton. The only issue is, there's two. One is mistakes, and two, I feel he's not aggressive enough. I mean, in Abu Dhabi, he had the chance to take the lead, I think a couple of times, and I can't help but feel he didn't. Now, yes, Ferrari, though, were gunning for that second place in the championship. Maybe that was more important to him than trying to pass Verstappen, because Verstappen was only going to get that pass. But as I said, when you're passing someone, you never know. Verstappen locks the wheel, loses a front wing, damages something. You never know when you put someone under pressure. And I want to show, kind of like with Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc being aggressive, going for the overtake, showing some hunger, Mansell-esque, for example. And I think once he can do that and iron out a few of his mistakes, he's going to be a really scary prospect. And still, I do believe, though, over one lap, even next year, Leclerc on single lap pace is the fastest driver in Formula One. And I think he's going to, he showed us last year, and I think he'll show us again in 2024. That Ferrari may well end up having the most poles. So, speaking of Ferrari driver, Carlos Sainz, yes, the stepchild maybe compared to Leclerc in Ferrari. I think he'll have a solid year, like Leclerc, wins, like Leclerc. I think poles are on the cards as well. Definitely podiums. It's just going to be how consistent he can be. I think he had highs and lows. He was the only guy, let's be honest, to beat the Red Bull team last year in a race. Well done. But then I had question marks over how consistent he really was. And I can't help but thinking that question mark of consistency is potentially going to go into 2024. But the issue is, who are they going to re-sign? Now, what's interesting is, if they don't announce Carlos Sainz within a month, of Charles Leclerc, that's going to raise big alarm bells in terms of re-signing him for next year. That's, for me, that's going to have massive alarm bells. And I think at that point, Alex Albon to Ferrari is potentially on the cards. But I do feel they've got arguably the second or third best driver pairing currently in Formula One. Given the car, they can do good things. Given a car, as we know, he can win a race. I think he'll be close to Leclerc like last year, but I think Leclerc just has that edge. But it's close, as we saw last year. And see you later. See you later, Sainz. So yes, Alex Albon, one of the enigmas in Formula One. So, Mr. Albon, you are definitely going to beat your teammate Logan Sargent. Definitely top 10s both times. That Williams team is going forward. Maybe a lucky podium, but I don't quite think so. However, I think the biggest thing going into 2024 for Alex Albon is going to be where he's going to be in 2025. Could he take a Red Bull seat? Could he take that Ferrari seat? He has really re-enhanced, re-established, done a 180, so to speak, on his reputation. However, the question mark is, this is against Logan Sargent. And, Logan Sargent, I think Latifi as well, not really great teammates to compare yourself against. That's going to be the only issue. So Alex Albon, I think he outdrove the Williams last year. But the big question mark is, how good is still Alex Albon? And that is still a question mark. Where you know how good, for example, Leclerc and Sainz are. I think you know how good George Russell is when compared to Lewis, for example, to Lewis Hamilton. Even you know how good Perez is compared to Verstappen. There's that question mark there for Albon. Still a bit of a risk, but I do feel he's completely 180, turn around his reputation. One of the standout drivers of last year. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. So, let's just recap then. So, Alex Albon, I think he'll have a solid year. No wins or anything like that, but I think he'll be absolutely solid. Carlos Sainz, another solid year. He won't beat his teammate Leclerc, though. I think he'll be just far behind. Wins podiums, potentially. Charles Leclerc wins and podiums. The fastest man on one lap, I feel, in Formula One at the moment. Daniel Ricciardo, once again, I think he'll be in a Red Bull come the summer break. I do feel it's goodbye to Sergio Perez. Esteban Ocon, not quite as good as Gasly. Potential podiums, maybe. Top 3 in qualifying, possibly. Alonso, this all depends on the car. I think podiums are on the cards, but I think he'll be behind Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren because of their cars. Magnussen, I feel, is going to be beaten by Hulkenberg, sadly, and may lose out on a seat next year. Lance Stroll, he's only here because of his dad. He's only going to be here next year because of his dad. There we go. Lando Norris, really solid drive, but we need to see more aggression from him, I think. And then he'll be complete. Lewis Hamilton, I think he could be a championship contender. All depends on how good that Mercedes car is. Has still got it. Logan Sargent maybe doesn't have it so much. I'll be surprised if Williams re-sign him for 2025. Championship favourite Max Verstappen, without a shadow of a doubt. He is going to be the man to beat in 2024. Nico Hulkenberg, I think this is his last year with Haas because maybe Audi will want to sign him, but he is going to beat Kevin Magnussen. Piastri, he will run Lando Norris really, really close. First win, potentially like Norris on the cards. First pole, potentially like Norris on the cards. Pierre Gasly, I think he's going to be the standout in the Alpine team, but I still think it's going to be close. A potential podium, given a Noah's Ark-esque bit of luck, let's say. Valtteri Bottas, yeah, he's a solid driver, but he's not going to set the world alight next year, I don't think. Tsunoda's in a fight for survival against Ricciardo. I think Ricciardo's going to just come out on top, though. Honda may save him, though, for next year. Well, Mr. Guanyu, I think, could be going. Solid, but not solid enough, especially when compared to Bottas. Very, I guess, meh. So, there we go. That is a recap. This has been the Hot Lap. This has been our prediction show. 40 minutes. My mouth is dry. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.